All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We're in Genesis. No, we're not. We're finally into something different other than Genesis.
Tally ho.
Yes, we're going to start into Ezra and Nehemiah. We're going to find they're rebuilding the soul and heart of Israel. Ezra is centered around the temple, which is the soul of Israel, and Nehemiah is centered around the wall, which Jerusalem, which is the heart of Israel. All right, you ready?
Ready.
Introduction. So Ezra and Nehemiah are one book, or at least they were when they started out. It wasn't until the 3rd century AD that the Christians split it. So the 200s, the Christians split it, I think, and they split it where Nehemiah's words start. So why they split it, we don't know. Maybe they were just bored one day and decided to split it. Or they couldn't remember everything. All those names just wore them out. So they split it. And then the 15th century, so the 1400s, then the Jewish Bible finally started splitting Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay. But they were intended as one book. The sources within the book, while we don't know who the compiler was, we do know the sources they used to compile it. And this was a compilation, not someone sitting down and writing it out. So we had historical records in there, and we'll see those. And we have memoirs. We actually have parts of the memoirs of Ezra and Nehemiah in there. And then we have letters that were to officials, kings, etc., and letters from the officials back to the people. So all these things were compiled then. We don't know when it was compiled. It's probably somewhere around 400 BC. Now, the dates of Ezra and Nehemiah for the activities that are in there, events, not activities. That makes it sound like school. Yes, we're going to have activities today. The events that are in there starts with 538 BC, where Cyrus, king of Persia, sends out an edict. We'll get to that in first chapter here. To 433 BC, when Nehemiah returns from Babylon to take over the governorship for the second time. Okay. So Ezra, the book of Ezra, covers events from 538 to 516 BC. We're rebuilding the temple, and then it jumps to 458 BC when Ezra returns. So Ezra really doesn't have anything to do with rebuilding the temple. He pops up after the fact and then takes all the credit for it. No, he doesn't take any credit for it. But every preacher I've heard gives Ezra credit about rebuilding the temple. It's like, no, he didn't. He just showed up after the fact. Nehemiah then runs from 445 to 433 BC, and that's rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. So just to give you a little bit of context, okay? So in 722 BC, the Syrian army comes in and conquers the northern kingdom of Israel. Remember, Judah and Israel split. The kingdom of Israel split to Israel in the north, Judah in the south. And so Assyria came in 722 and wiped out the northern kingdom of Israel and deported those people who were in that area into other areas of Assyria. In 605 was the first deportation of Judah to Babylon. Now, Assyria had come in and taken over most of Judah. Jerusalem was about all that was left. So when Babylon comes in, they took over Jerusalem. They conquered Jerusalem in 605. That started the first deportation. The people of Jerusalem, the king of Jerusalem, gets uppity with the king of Babylon. So in 597, Babylon comes back and takes out Jerusalem again, and a second deportation to Babylon. Finally, in 586, Nebuchadnezzar has had enough. King of Babylon has had enough. He just destroys Jerusalem and the temple, and that is the final deportation of people into Babylon. The only people that are left are the poor people who would be farming. Okay, the city is desolate at this point. So that is where the people are. They are in Babylon at this time. Okay. But see if I put this in there. God had told them that he was going to bring the people back to the promised land. Through Jeremiah and through other prophets, he said, yes, you're going to go into exile, but I'm going to bring you back. And that's what we're going to see in Ezra and Nehemiah, this return. While they are gone, because there is no temple and they are scattered all over the place, they developed the synagogue system. So that synagogues now became the place where the Jews would go and worship God. They would read scriptures and sing psalms and whatever, have potlucks. No, that's the Baptist. They would go and worship at the synagogues. Okay. Yeah, casseroles. So the temple in Jerusalem, though, is the soul of Israel, and that's what they all longed for, was that return. And Jerusalem was the heart of Israel, so Nehemiah rebuilt the wall. The reason that God placed the Jews into exile in the first place was because they were worshiping false gods. They even had gods within the temple itself that they were worshiping. And so God said, you're not representing me, get out of here. All right. So now these people who have finally, hopefully, learned their lesson that God is the true God, don't worship other gods, they're going to start coming back. God is going to start bringing them back. All right. So Ezra 1:1. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and also put it in writing. All right, so Cyrus, Persia comes in 539 BC, and they take over Babylon. We read about this in Daniel chapter 5, where they're having this feast and using the articles from the temple for their big drunken party. And the Persians dam up the river, come in under the wall, and take Babylon pretty much without a fight. That ends the Babylonian Empire and begins the Persian Empire in 539. The first year of Cyrus's reign then over the entire empire would be 538 BC. Okay. Now, he says, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. And I think there's a couple of reasons why this is mentioned. Number one, Jeremiah in his writings said that Babylon would only last 70 years. So often people think that, oh, well, the exile was only supposed to last 70 years. No, the exile lasted way more than 70 years. But Babylon itself was only going to last 70 years. And Babylon took over Assyria in 609, and then they got defeated by the Persians in 539. How many years is that?
About 70.
70 years, yeah. Now, often in writing, 70 would just be a generalized number, but this one was specific. So Ezra whoever's compiling this, is pointing toward this event, that God was right in saying that Babylon would only last 70 years. Second, I think that the writer, whoever, or compiler, is pointing toward this passage in Jeremiah, where in Jeremiah 25, 11 through 12, and 29, 10 through 14, God is speaking, saying, I am going to bring you back to me. And so he says in Jeremiah 29, 12 through 14, then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you. And I think this is a very important reference here, even though it's not specifically said. These people know what Jeremiah said, that they were to return to him. And since Ezra focuses on rebuilding the temple, coming back to a true worship of God, this is probably a good reason for referring to Jeremiah. Okay. All right, verse 2. So Cyrus, king of Persia, makes his proclamation throughout the realm and puts it in writing. Verse 2. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem and Judah. Any of his people among you may go up to Jerusalem and Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem, and may their God be with them. And in any locality where survivors may now be living, the people are to provide them with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with freewill offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. Okay, so that is what the Jews received. Now, this passage and the passage at the end of 2 Chronicles are the only places we have this edict written down. The only evidence we have for this edict, this specific edict. However, on the Cyrus cylinder, which is what you see right there, it says that Marduk, the great Babylonian god, is the one who told Cyrus, or gave Cyrus the ability to say, everyone can go and rebuild their temples. But I think out of that general edict, you had little specific edicts like to Judah or maybe to some other areas where the temples were to be built. Okay, so this is the one that Judah would have received. Now, don't think for a minute that Cyrus is doing this out of religious conviction. This is a political move. The people will love this Persian Empire much better and be more docile toward it if he allows them to go back to their lands after they've been pulled out of them by Assyria and Babylon, go back to their lands and rebuild their temples to their gods. As far as he was concerned, their gods were nothing. Marduk was the only real God, the true big God. Okay, so this has nothing to do with him being religious. It has nothing to do with him following the God of Israel. It is a political move. All right. But he has given permission now for them to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. And those who do not go back can go ahead and give to them to help in rebuilding the temple.
Is this actual?
This is the actual Cyrus cylinder that they found. And it has this information on it. Yeah. And it's in some museum somewhere. It is not in my closet.
That's say, Phil, did you get a hold on?
I wish I could.
I know you do.
All right, verse 5. Then the family heads of Judah and Benjamin and the priests and Levites, everyone whose heart God had moved, prepared to go up and build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. So the family heads of Judah and Benjamin, remember, Judah and Benjamin were the only ones that were part of Judah. And this concerns Judah only. It does not concern Israel, the northern kingdom. It is only Judah with Jerusalem. Okay? And this is important because as they come back, they're going to be taking back over their land that their families owned. All right? So this is important to Judah and Benjamin only. So family heads of Judah and Benjamin, along with the Levites. The Levites were the people who were in charge of teaching the people about God and helping the priests with the temple. Notice something. Everyone whose heart God had moved. Not everyone was supposed to go back. Only those people God said, you go back and you help build the temple. So not everyone's going to go back. And we see that because Mordecai didn't go back. Esther's family didn't go back. Okay. Which God probably didn't call them because he knew what was going to happen later on. Esther was going to be needed there. So Verse 6, all their neighbors assisted them with articles of silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with valuable gifts, in addition to all the freewill offerings. So those who didn't go, who couldn't go, gave to help out and support this mission. We're kind of in the same position here at Woodcrest right now. We have people going in April to Jamaica, and we get the opportunity to be a part of that, even though we can't go, but we can give school supplies to them. So, if you can't go, help out however you can. Okay. All right, verses 7 through 11. Drink of water before I start this. Moreover, King Cyrus brought out the articles belonging to the temple of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and had placed in the temple of his God. Cyrus, king of Persia, had them brought by Mithridath, the treasurer, who counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. This was his inventory. Gold dishes, 30. Silver dishes, 1,000. Silver pans, 29. Gold bowls, 30. Matching silver bowls, 410. Other articles, 1,000. In all, there were 5,400 articles of gold and silver. Sheshbazzar brought all these along with the exiles when they came up from Babylon to Jerusalem. So when Nebuchadnezzar came in and finally took out the temple, before he destroyed it, he went in and looted it. And then I already mentioned this, in Daniel 5, we see them pulling them out of their temple for one of their gods to use in their royal drunken whatever, party. So what's happening here is now Cyrus says, take these things, give them back to the people so that they can properly worship their God. Once again, this is a political move. Okay, let the people have what they want for their temple. And so they pull all this out, they give it to Sheshbazzar, whatever his name is, the prince of Judah, who apparently he was maybe the informal leader of Judah at this time, okay, the exiles. Now, if you'll notice, the inventory does not match up. The inventory in verses 9 and 10 does not match up with the 5,400 articles of gold and silver in verse 11. You say, an error in the Bible. No, the articles in verse 11 also include all the neighbors' articles that they gave in verse 6. Okay, so verse 6, 9, 10, and that equals 11. My math is not good, okay? I know 6, 9, 10, 11 don't really equal. Okay. So now they have the articles to use in the temple. They will have to purify them, make them holy again, because they've been contaminated with other gods. But they have the articles now. And we can also see in Isaiah 52:11, he says that this will happen. Okay. All right, that was chapter 1. Fast. Chapter 2. Drink. Here we go. Now, these are the people of the province who came up from the captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to their own town. Okay, remember, this is about land. These people come back, they know where their family's land was, and they go back to their family's land or to the town that their family was in. Okay. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to their own town. In company with Zerubbabel, Zerubbabel is the governor. He is the legitimate governor Persia has placed in that position. Joshua, who is the high priest. Nehemiah, not the one we're going to read about in the book of Nehemiah. This is a different Nehemiah. Seraiah, Realiah, Mordecai, not the one in Esther. Bilsham, Mizpar, Bigvai, Rehum, and Baanah. Not banana, Baanah, okay? So these were the leaders. These were the main men coming back and leading the people to Jerusalem and to Judah. So list of the men of the people of Israel. And the way they do this is partitioned out. Okay. So we're going to have leaders, then we're going to have families, then towns, and then those who work in the temple. So verse 2. The descendants of Parosh, 2,172. Of Shephatiah, 372. Of Era, 775. Of Pahath Moab, through the line of Jeshua and Joab, 2,812. Of Elam, 1,254. Of Zatu, 945. Of Zekai, 760. Of Bani, 642. Of Bebai, oh my goodness, 623. Of Asgad, 1,222. Of Adonikam, 666. I bet that was a really fun family. Of Bigvai, 2,056. Of Aden, 454. Of Ader, through Hezekiah, 98. Of Bezai, 323. Of Jorah, 112. Of Hashem, 223. Of Gebar, 95. So these were is list of the leaders of the families. Okay. Now we're going to get into verse 21, which are the towns. So these families were probably not associated with any particular town. They may have been going out into farmland or whatever, or around the towns, but they were not associated with any town. The next group is associated with a particular town. So you have the men of Bethlehem, 123. Of Netopha, 56. Of Anatoth, 128. Of Asmaveth, 42. Of Kiriath Jearim, Gephera, and Beeroth, 743. Of Ramah and Geba, 621. Of Michmash, 122. Of Bethel and Ai, 223. Of Nebo, 52. Of Magbish, 156. Of the other Elam, 1,254. Of Harim, 320. Of Lod, Hadid, and Ono, 725. Of Jericho, 345. Of Sinah, 3,630. So those people were related to towns, all right? Not necessarily their families, but the towns. And now we get to the temple. So from 36 to 58 is all related to people surrounding the temple. So the priests, who would have been the ones who actually did sacrifices and so forth. The descendants of Jedaiah through the family of Jeshua, 973. Of Immer, 1,052. Of Pashur, 1,247. Of Harim, 1,017. The Levites, who would help the priests, and they were spread out throughout the country to help teach people. The descendants of Jeshua and Kadmiel of the line of Hodaviah, 74. So not very many Levites came back. The musicians, the descendants of Asaph, 128. So you had musicians, and Asaph was the one that David chose to be the lead musician when he brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. Asaph is also the author of several of the Psalms. Okay, so he was a big dude as far as music went, and some of his descendants. Yes.
So as all these people are going back and reclaiming their territory or whatever, what happens? I mean, were the people that were living on the land when they came and that they just kind of left? Or?
We're going to get to that. Yes.
We're getting ahead.
That is actually the main question of Ezra
Yeah. Okay.
and Nehemiah. Okay, so 42, the gatekeepers of the temple. So the temple was a compound, okay? You had the outer court, they had gates to it, and then the temple itself, with the inner court and then the temple. So you had gates around, you had gatekeepers to keep out the riffraff, or something, I don't know. Gatekeepers of the temple. The descendants of Shalom, Ater, Talmon, Jacob, Hatita, and Shobai, 139. And then you had temple servants. We don't know much about the temple servants, who they were. They may have been descendants of the Gibeonites way back in Joshua this time. Remember, the Gibeonites came up and said, hey, we're from far away. Can you make a deal with us, a treaty with us? And they did without consulting God. And then Gibeonites end up being enslaved, becoming servants for the temple to cut wood and whatever they need. So it could be them. The descendants of Ziha, Hasupha, Nebaioth, Keros, Sayaha, Padon, Lebanah, Hagabah, Akub, Hagab, Shammai, Hanan, Gidel, Gahar, Rehiah, Rezin, Nakoda, Gezem, Uzzah, Paseah, Basai, Asna, Meunim, Nephusim, Bakbuk, Hakupha, Harhur, Bazlith, Mehida, Harsha, Barkos, Sisera, Tema, Neziah, and Hatipha. Okay. Now, while people think they may have been given, they may have been Israelites too, and that's why they are listed here.
I feel like I'm at a bar mitzvah.
What?
I feel like I'm at a bar mitzvah.
Yeah. I'm trying to get my tongue untied.
You're doing great.
55. The descendants of the servants of Solomon. We know absolutely nothing about these servants of Solomon. But here they are anyway. The descendants of Sotai, Hassophereth, Peruda, Jala, Darkon, Gidel, Shephatiah, Hatil, Pokereth. That does not mean he plays a lot of poker. Pokereth, Hasabaim, and Ami. The temple servants and the descendants of the servants of Solomon, 392 of them. Okay. And you expect them to be kind of a smaller number because there wouldn't need to be that many people serving in the temple. All right. So those are all the people who came back in their numbers. Verse 59. The following came up from the towns of Tel Melah, Tel Harsha, Kerub, Adon, and Emer. But they could not show that their families were descended from Israel. There's a problem. The descendants of Delaiah, Tobiah, and Nakoda, 652. And from among the priests, these guys also can't prove that they are priests. The descendants of Hobiah, Hakaz, and Barzillai, a man who had married a daughter of Barzillai the Gileadite and was called by that name. These searched for their family records, but they could not find them and so were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. The governor ordered them not to eat any of the most sacred food until there was a priest ministering with the Urim and Thummim. All right, so what's happened here, you have these people who their genealogy cannot be proven. Well, if you can't prove your genealogy, you don't get any land. Second, if you are a priest and cannot prove your genealogy, you cannot serve in the temple, which means you don't get the free food the priests get. You don't get the land that the priests get in their cities. You have to stay away, otherwise you run the risk of making the temple unclean by having someone who is not a priest serve there, okay, or do a sacrifice. And I think we all know how that turns out, because every time somebody goes to do a sacrifice or put in incense that they shouldn't do it, God has a lightning bolt and they're gone. All right. All right. So verse 64. So the Urim and Thummim. Let me explain that real fast.
Sci-fi thing.
Yeah. So what that is, the high priest would have this vest, and you'd have a big stone here and a big stone here, Urim and Thummim, and he would pray to God, and he would receive responses from God. I don't know if it's like, if this one lights up, it's yes, and if this one lights up, it's no. I don't know, but they had to wait for a high priest, which would be Joshua, to come and use that in order to confirm that these people really were priests or not priests. Okay.
But that didn't disappear when like the covenant went away as well.
I think it may have disappeared. That's why they're having to wait for the Urim, and they could create a new one. That may be what they were waiting on, was create a new one.
But around this time in the Bible, it like just doesn't get
Yeah,
talked
just-
about again.
Oh, Yeah. yeah. And at this point, you notice they're not bringing the ark back.
Yeah.
The ark we don't know where the ark went.
Indiana Jones. will find
Indiana Jones will find it.
it.
A lot of people think it's in Ethiopia, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's just speculation. All right. So, verse 64. The whole company numbered 42,360 besides their 7,337 male and female slaves, and they also had 200 male and female singers. They had 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys. Woo-hoo. All right, so they have all this livestock. You notice what's missing in the livestock? Sheep. There's no sheep. I don't know if they're going to get them when they get here or what, but these are all animals for working. Your, not your female singers, the horses. I just went to female singers. Thought that's not right. You have horses, mules, camels, donkeys. All of these are beasts of burden. Okay, that could transport quickly from where they were in Babylon to Judah. You didn't want to try oxen because that would be the slowest trip ever. But they made it here. Okay. Verse 68. When they arrived at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of the families gave free will offerings toward the rebuilding of the house of God on its site. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury for this work 61,000 derricks of gold and 5,000 minas of silver and 100 priestly garments. So they gave about 1,100 pounds of gold, 3 tons of silver, and 100 garments for the priests. Now, these were the heads of the families, okay? These were the rich dudes. And that's on top of what the people who stayed behind gave. These are the people who came that gave this, okay? Verse 70, the priests, the Levites, the musicians, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants settled in their own towns along with some of the other people, and the rest of the Israelites settled in their own towns. So everybody scouted out where their land was or their town was, and they went to it. Now, the Levites, they were spread out throughout the country in about 6 different towns, maybe 3 in Judah. So they went to those towns. The temple workers probably would have stayed within Jerusalem, okay, because that's where their homes would be. And the rest of the people then went to their own towns.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like their genealogies, is that word of mouth that they knew, or was it written down? Same with any other properties.
Yeah, it's probably more word of mouth at this time. It wasn't oral tradition, and you could rely on oral traditions. Yeah.
The markers would have been done.
Oh, the markers probably would have been gone, you know. But still, because of the oral tradition, these people knew where they were. And some of these families had only been gone for about 50 years. So that's not long. You can still remember where Grandpa had his place. All right, chapter 3. When the 7th month came and the Israelites had settled in their towns, the people assembled together as one in Jerusalem. Then Joshua, son of Josedek, and his fellow priests, and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and his associates began to build the altar of God of Israel to sacrifice burnt offerings on it in accordance with what is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Despite their fear of the peoples around them, they built the altar and its foundation and sacrificed burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and evening sacrifices. Then, in accordance with what is written, they celebrated the festival of tabernacles with the required number of burnt offerings prescribed for each day. After that, they presented the regular burnt offerings, the new moon, sacrifices, and the sacrifices for all the appointed sacred festivals of the Lord, as well as those brought as free will offerings to the Lord. On the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, though the foundation of the Lord's temple had not yet been laid. All right, so here we have the building of the altar. Now, you have the building that is the temple. The altar is outside because you do not want to be doing fire inside the temple for 2 reasons. You'll burn down the temple and the smoke would be too much for you. So all the offerings were on the altar outside the temple, right in front of the door to the temple. And they came the 7th month, which is mid-September to mid-October. And they say it's the first year they were there, so that's around 537 BC. By the way, a little hint about these numbers, these 537, 538. So you may read other books that are like 1 year off. And that's because we're not sure how they counted the years for the kings that they're referencing. So like the first year of Cyrus could be 539, or it could be 538. It depends on how they count that. And the king's year, the year could change right in the middle of another year. So depending on when the king ascended the throne. So 537 BC, we're going to go with my things because that way I won't get messed up. If you read something different, don't worry about it. Go with them too. All right. So 7th month is mid-September, mid-October. It is an extremely busy month. I will show you in a minute how busy it is. Joshua was the high priest. Zerubbabel was the governor. And they come together and they start this building project on the altar. Now, this wasn't like an altar this size, okay? This was an altar that would probably be 3, okay? 3 squared of these tables, almost a quarter of this room. Huge. And they rebuilt the altar even though they were afraid. They were already facing opposition from people because they are moving in and it's displacing other people. Back to your question, okay? But they went ahead and did it anyway. Now, it mentions a bunch of sacrifices. So I just want to go through in order what these sacrifices would be in the 7th month. So the 7th month starts with the feast or festival of trumpets. That's the first day. That would be the new year. It's celebrating a new year for them. All right. You have the new moon festivals, which would be the first day of the month, because remember, their months were lunar months. Ours are solar. So they would have lunar months. So the first day of the new moon was a special event. You'd have daily sacrifices. And they would be the morning and evening sacrifices. And so these are all, by the way, put into Leviticus, Numbers, Exodus, etc. You would have free will offerings, where someone would come up and say, I want to just do an offering because I want to thank God for what he has given me. Okay, free will offerings. You have the Day of Atonement, and this would be a big one for them, and it looks like they must have done this if they started on the first day. The Day of Atonement would be the 10th, and this was the big day where the sins of the people were atoned for through sacrifices. Okay, even the sins of the priest would be atoned for. And so they would have done this. And this was very important to them because they are coming out of exile. They want to be atoned for having, or either them or their ancestors having worshiped false gods. They want to be atoned for the sins that caused this temple to be destroyed in the first place, and for them to be in exile, and for all the sins they did while they're in exile. Okay? So Day of Atonement. And then you have the Feast or Festival of Tabernacles. And that was set up to remind the people of their wandering in the wilderness. You come and you'd have a tent, or you'd build a tabernacle, a booth, which was just a bunch of sticks put together with a little roof on it. I'm so glad I don't have to do that because I can't build anything like that. I'd end up underneath it and fall in and die. So this was to remind them of their passage from Egypt into the promised land. And what are they doing now? They're coming from Babylon into the promised land. So they're in basically the same position as those who were wandering in the wilderness, coming out of Egypt. They're coming into a place God has promised them. God had promised them that they would return, and here they are. All right, so we had donations for builders. Verse 7. Then they gave money to the masons and carpenters and gave food and drink and olive oil to the people of Sidon and Tyre so that they would bring cedar logs by sea from Lebanon to Joppa as authorized by Cyrus, king of Persia. So the first thing they do is they make sure that the carpenters and the stonemasons get paid because they want to rebuild the temple now. You don't pay your workers, you're not going to get any work done. I don't care if it's union or not. You don't get any work done. Okay, so they gave money to this. They've already given a bunch of money. Now they're going to give more for these guys. And then they're also going to pay Tyre and Sidon, who are two cities northeast of Israel in the Lebanon area. Is that right? Anyway, up by the Mediterranean. And they actually provided the beams, the cedar beams, for the original Solomon temple. So they're trying to rebuild it the same way they had it before, at least trying. So Cyrus had already said, you are going to give them this. But they said, well, let's go ahead and at least give them food and olive oil that they can use in payment for these logs. So they didn't want them to go without being paid. Verse 8, in the second month of the second year after their arrival at the house of God in Jerusalem, so that would be somewhere around April or May, 536 BC. Okay. Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, Joshua, son of Josadak, the rest of the people, the priests and Levites, and all who had returned from the captivity of Jerusalem, began to work. So that's the start date. April, May, 536 BC. They appointed Levites 20 years old and older to supervise the building of the house of the Lord. All right, so they don't want just anybody in there, and they don't want the work just to be done by however the stonemasons and the carpenters want. They want people who know what they're doing, who respect God, and can give them direction. So the Levites then are told to do this. And they had to be 20 years old and older. That apparently seems to be the age of maturity. Because when God took them out in the wilderness, he said those 20 years old and younger are going to survive, 20 years old and above are not, or 21 years old and above are not. So he made a cutoff there. So these guys are 20 years old and older. Verse 9, Joshua and his sons and brothers and Kadmiel and his sons, descendants of Hodaviah, and the sons of Henadad, and their sons and brothers, all Levites, joined together in supervising those working on the house of God. Okay, so Joshua got his clan together and they worked on supervision. Verse 10. When the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests in their vestments and with trumpets, and Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, took their places to praise the Lord as prescribed by David, king of Israel. With praise and thanksgiving they sang to the Lord, He is good. His love toward Israel endures forever. And all the people gave a great shout of praise to the Lord because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. They were really looking forward to this. They were praising God because the foundation is laid. They are going to be able to worship God again as God described in the books of Moses, prescribed in the books of Moses. So they have turned completely away from their false gods. They are focused completely on God now, and they are just overjoyed. But
Is this built on the same foundation?
same foundation, yeah. It is, well, not same foundation, but same place, same location. The temple is always in the same location because that's where God said to put it.
And
The Wailing Wall is part of the base that's Herod built around the temple to be able to have this flat area and expand the temple area. Yeah, and it is the western side of that thing. Verse 12. So you got all this partying going on. Yay, we've got this going. But, verse 12. But many of the older priests and Levites and family heads who had seen the former temple wept aloud when they saw the foundation of this temple being laid, while many others shouted for joy. No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping, because the people made so much noise, and the sound was heard far away. So you had the celebration in 10:11. Then you got the Debbie Downers to come in, and they are mourning. Why? Because the foundation is so small. They remember it's only been 50 years since some of them got deported, so they would remember how big and grand this temple was. And now, instead of celebrating that there is going to be a temple, that there is a movement forward in the temple, they want to hold on to the past and mourn that we aren't like we were before. Does that not sound familiar? Woodcrest is not the only church that has that problem, by the way. Every church I've been in and has always mourned that, oh, we're not like we were before. And you can see the why. I mean, they wanted to honor God the way they did before. But God doesn't have any problem with it. In fact, here's God's response in Haggai. Haggai is a prophet of Israel, prophet of Judah. Israel, anyway, he's a Hebrew prophet, put it that way. And he comes in around the time of Darius, about this time, okay? Actually later than this. But he comes in around the time of them building the temple. And God says, hey, I know some of you guys aren't too happy about this being smaller, but you know what? Size doesn't matter. It's what's inside. The building does not matter. It is what is inside the building. And he says, the glory of this present house will be greater than the glory of the former house. Why? Because God alone will be there. You won't have all these other gods that you're worshiping. God will actually be there. Whereas in Ezekiel, God left there and you didn't know it. This place, even though it's smaller, is going to be even greater because God is there. God is the focus now. And as we move forward as Woodcrest, we need to remember that. We may be smaller, but God is here. And I fully believe God is going to do great things. I can see plans being made. Actions are being done. So just hang on tight, people. All right. Chapter 4. Yes, in order to complete these books in the time I have, we have to get through 3 or 4 chapters every time. So here we go. Chapter 4, verse 1 through 5. When the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the exiles were building a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel, they came to Zerubbabel and to the heads of the families and said, let us help you build, because like you, we seek your God and have been sacrificing to him since the time of Ezra, king of Assyria, who brought us here. Okay, so these are non-Jewish residents of Judah, and we're really going to get into your question now about these people. They come up and they say, hey, we have been worshiping your God since we got here. That probably wasn't true. What they're wanting to do is to stop the temple building. All right. But they've been there since Ezra had deported them from their country into there. Now, if you look at, it would have helped if I put the dates up there. Oh, there we go. Placed by Assyrians, 681, 669 BC. Okay. So they were placed by Esarhaddon into Judah, 681 to 669 BC. Now it's 536 BC. Their families have lived there for over 100 years. And now these people are coming in and they are taking title to these lands and kicking them out, displacing them. We have the same problem now with Israel and Palestine. I mean, Israel got permission to come back in 47, and the Palestinians kind of got shoved out. Okay. These people, this is what they're worried about. They do not want the temple to be rebuilt, because what happens if the temple gets rebuilt? You have more people coming in. Okay. They don't want that. So, verse 3. But Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the rest of the heads of the families of Israel answered, you have no part with us in building a temple to our God. We alone will build it for the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, commanded us. So they appealed to God and to the king. What do you say? So verse 4. Then the peoples around them set out to discourage the people of Judah and make them afraid to go on building. They bribed officials to work against them and frustrate their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus, king of Persia, and down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Okay, so they're going on a little opposition thing here. So they are bribing people and tormenting people, intimidating people so that the work doesn't get done. Okay, that sounds kind of like a mob thing. I'm going to intimidate the concrete people so they don't give you concrete. And they were bribing officials. These were probably the Persian officials who would have been laying out the contracts for and allowing things to move within Judah. Okay. Verse 6. Verse 6 through 23 are out of place. Okay. And I'll show you how they are out of place. We're going to read through the whole thing and I'll show you how they're out of place. At the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, they lodged an accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. In the days of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and the rest of his associates wrote a letter to Artaxerxes. The letter was written in Aramaic script and in the Aramaic language. From 6:8 on until 8 something, I think it is. This is now in Aramaic. It's not in Hebrew, it's in Aramaic because they're quoting people who are using Aramaic. Okay, and the letters would have been written in Aramaic. So Rehum, the commanding officer, and Shimshai, the secretary, wrote a letter against Jerusalem to Artaxerxes the king as follows. Rehum, the commanding officer, and Shimshai, the secretary, together with the rest of their associates, the judges, officials, and administrators over the people from Persia, Uruk, and Babylon, the Elamites of Susa, and the other people whom the great and honorable Ashurbanipal deported and settled in the city of Samaria and elsewhere in Trans-Euphrates. This is a copy of the letter they sent him. To King Artaxerxes, from your servants in Trans-Euphrates, the king should know that the people who came up to us from you have gone to Jerusalem and are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They're restoring the walls and repairing the foundations. Furthermore, the king should know that if this city is built and its walls are restored, no more taxes, tribute, or duty will be paid, and eventually the royal revenues will suffer. Hit him in the pocketbook. That's where it hurts. Now, since we are under obligation to the palace and it is not proper for us to see the king dishonored, we are sending this message to inform the king so that a search may be made in the archives of your predecessors. In these records, you will find that this city is a rebellious city, troublesome to kings and provinces, a place with a long history of sedition. That is why the city was destroyed. And we inform the king that if this city is built and its walls are restored, you will be left with nothing in Trans-Euphrates. The king sent this reply. To Rehum, the commanding officer, Shimshai, the secretary, and the rest of their associates living in Samaria and elsewhere in Trans-Euphrates. Greetings. The letter you sent us has been read and translated in my presence. I issued an order and a search was made, and it was found that this city has a long history of revolt against kings and has been a place of rebellion and sedition. Jerusalem has had powerful kings ruling over the whole of Trans-Euphrates, and taxes, tribute, and duty were paid to them. Now issue an order to these men to stop work so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order. Be careful not to neglect this matter. Why let this threat grow to the detriment of the royal interests? As soon as a copy of the letter of King Artaxerxes was read to Rehum and Shimshai, the secretary, and their associates, they went immediately to the Jews in Jerusalem and compelled them by force to stop. So what is going on here is someone is trying to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. This has nothing to do with the temple at this point. They're trying to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And they're doing this, it starts out early in the reign of King Xerxes, all right, who was the king with Esther. And he ruled, if you look up here, they mention Ashurbanipal, okay, 669, 633. Ashurbanipal of Assyria repopulates Samaria. Samaria was what used to be the kingdom of Israel. So these people have been there since at least 633, so almost 100 years. 516, the temple is completed, by the way, in 516. That's a spoiler alert. It's not completed yet. In 486 to 465, King Xerxes of Persia rules. So early on, within the first few years of Xerxes coming in, 486, that's when they all right, the first letter to Xerxes. It seems to be ignored. Well, there's probably a reason for that, because in 486, from 486 to 480, Xerxes was putting down revolts and going and attacking the Greeks. He had other things on his mind. He didn't care about the silly little temple in Jerusalem. Then in 480, around that time, Esther comes into power as queen, and we have this whole thing with Haman trying to kill all the Jews, and I'm sure that went over well in Judah. We can kill them and get rid of them. We can take their land. But of course, that didn't come out good, because the king eventually gives them, the Jews, the right to defend themselves, and they took out those who were oppressing them or opposing them. So after that fiasco, they didn't do anything until the next king came in, because they knew if they tried again with Xerxes, it was going to be, well, they're Jewish, you leave them alone. My queen says, you leave them alone. So they go with Artaxerxes, who took over in 464. They get with him. They send a letter explaining their position that Jerusalem has been a terrible city to kings, and it has. The Assyrians never took it. The Babylonians took them 3 times to really take it over. Okay, they just kept rebelling, even though they were taking over Babylon. So Artaxerxes looks at these records and says, forget this, I don't need any more trouble, and says they are to stop building the wall. So the work on the wall stops in verse 23. Now, put this in more context. Ezra doesn't arrive until 450, or Ezra arrives in 458, which is later than this. And in 445, Nehemiah arrives in Jerusalem. It is this account, these walls that were trying to be built. Nehemiah may have heard that these walls were trying to be built, because he is with Artaxerxes, by the way, in his court. And that's why he's surprised. The walls aren't rebuilt. And then he goes in the morning. And so that's what spawns him to go to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls. Okay. And by that time, Artaxerxes has changed his mind because he likes Nehemiah. So verse 23, the work has stopped on the walls. Verse 24. Verse 24 really needs to be up underneath verse 5. Okay, so verse 5, they bribed officials to work against them, and officials and frustrated their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus, king of Persia, and down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Thus the work of the house, verse 24, thus the work on the house of God in Jerusalem came to a standstill until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So went to a standstill until the 2nd year of reign of Darius, king of Persia, which will be 520 BC. So they stopped because of the opposition in verses 1 through 5, which is 536 BC. And it'll begin again in 520 BC under Darius. This is also when Haggai begins his ministry. 520 BC, the 2nd year. Okay. So I think the reason that this part about the walls is in here is they tend to group things. The Hebrew writers tend to group things together, and this is a good place for them to group this in with opposition. Okay. And apparently they understood the time change there. All right. So at this point, there's no walls, there's no temple, but we do have an altar that they can use. So it is easier to see where God is leading when you know where God has been. And these people that are coming back know where God's been. God has already led them from Egypt into the promised land once. God had promised through the prophets that he was going to lead them back into the land. And so that is what is going on. All right. Thank you all.